Progressive magazine exercise number 9, 840 words at the rate 100 word per minute. Start. I have listened attentively and with respect to many of the speeches made here, and sometimes I have felt as if I was being buffeted by the ice winds of the Cold War. Coming from a warm country, I have shivered occasionally at these cold blasts. Speaking here in this assembly chamber, an old memory comes back to me. In the fateful summer of 1938, I was a visitor at a meeting of the League of Nations in Geneva. Hitler was advancing then and holding our threats of war. There was mobilization in many parts of Europe, and the tramp of armed men was being heard. Even so, the League of Nations appeared to be unconcerned and discussed all manner of subjects except the most vital subject of the day. The war had not started then. A year later, it descended upon the world with all its thunder and destructive fury. After many years of carnage, the war ended and a new age was ushered in by the terrible experience of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Fresh from these horrors, the minds of men turned to thoughts of peace, and there was a passionate desire to put an end to war itself. The United Nations took birth on a note of high idealism embodied in the noble wording of the character, but there was also a realization of the state of the post-war world as it was. Therefore, provision was made in the structure of the organization to balance certain conflicting urges. There were permanent members of the Security Council, and there was provision for unanimity amongst the great powers. All this was not very logical, but it represented certain realities of the world as it was, and because of this, we accepted them. At that time, large areas in Asia and even more so in Africa were not represented in the United Nations, and they were under colonial domination. Since then, the colonial part of the world has shrunk greatly, and we now welcome here many countries from Africa in their new freedom. The United Nations has become progressively more representative, but we must remember that even now it is not fully so. Colonialism still has its strong footholds in some parts of the world, and racialism are still prevalent, especially in Africa. The United Nations has often been criticized for its structure and for some of its activities. The structure of the United Nations when it started was vague in favor of Europe and the Americas. It did not seem to us to be fair to the countries of Asia and Africa, but we appreciated the difficulties of the situation and did not press for any changes. With the growth of the United Nations and more countries coming in, its structure today has become still more unbalanced. Even so, we wish to proceed slowly and with agreement and not to press for any change which would involve an immediate amendment of the Charter and the raising of heated controversies Unfortunately, we live in a split world which is constantly coming up against the basic assumptions of the United Nations. We have to bear with this and try to move even more forward to the conceptual of full of cooperation between nations. That cooperation does not and must not mean any domination of one country by another, any coercion or compulsion forcing a country to line up with another country. Each country has something to give and something to take from others. The moment coercion is exerted on a country, not only is its freedom impaired, but its growth suffers. We have to acknowledge that there is great diversity in the world and that this variety is good and is to be encouraged so that each country may grow and its creative impulse might have full play in accordance with its own genius. Hundreds and thousands of years of history have conditioned us in our respective countries, and our roots go deep down into the soil. If these roots are pulled out, we wither stop. If these roots mean strong and we allow the winds from our quarters to blow in upon us, they will yield branch, flower, and fruit. Many of the speakers from this forum have surveyed the world scene and spoken on a variety of problems. I would like to concentrate on what I consider the basic problem of all. My mind is naturally filled with problems of my own country and our passionate desire to develop and to put an end to the poverty and low standards of living which have been a curse to hundreds of millions of our people. To that end, we are laboring as ended other underdeveloped countries are doing. Even so, there is something else which we consider is a greater importance, that is peace. Without peace, all our dreams vanish and are reduced to ashes. The Charter of the United Nations declares our determination to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights. Stop.